I've been living on this property for about 6 years now. It's a piece of land I bought with the sweat of my brow and about 3 more installments in arrears. It was nothing spectacular, but it was mine. A simple house, a decent lawn, a stubborn vegetable garden, and, of course, the barn. That old red barn that stood at the back, proud, with faded paint, a little crooked at the base, but as strong as a tired bull. It was where I kept my tools, the animal's feed, some fishing tackle, and, occasionally, I used it as an escape from my own home when I needed some quiet. The HOA, the Residents Association, always existed there as a semi-ghostly entity. It sent out newsletters, sometimes a pointless fine for unscheduled garbage, but nothing that took me seriously. Until she took over. The president, that woman who came in wearing a light blazer, with an agenda in her hands and a smile so forced that you could hear the sound of her teeth grinding even from meters away. The kind of person who wakes up early just to put everything under her personal control, as if she were a suburban deity. They say she used to be an HR manager. I never doubted it. At first, we even tried to keep things friendly, but it only took the first meeting for me to realize that she wasn't there to manage. She was there to command. She created a committee to assess environmental noise, an inspector for aesthetic vibration, a form for authorizing lawn chairs. That's right, you had to fill in a form to put a chair in your backyard. The trouble really started on a Tuesday morning. I came back from the market, drove around the grounds, and found it strange to see boxes near the entrance to the barn. They were big, stacked up, and had that natureba look. Recycled paper, organic stickers, and a strong smell of lemongrass with something rotten in it. I took a closer look and saw that they were sealed with the name Integral Wellness Community Club. I didn't even bother to think about it. I thought someone had delivered them to the wrong place. The next day, there were more, and more the next. A truck arrived at 8 in the morning, stopped at the side entrance to my property, and 2 guys started unloading more boxes. I went over to ask what the hell that was all about. The driver, sweating profusely, handed me the invoice. Recipient, HOA Club. Delivery address, mine, my barn, my land, my address. I knocked on the door of the HOA headquarters, now housed in a refurbished container behind the playground, and asked what all the fuss was about. She appeared with the same expression that a bank manager wears when he tells you that your credit has been denied for internal reasons. Oh yes, we're using your barn as a temporary base for the yoga and wellness club. Don't worry, it's only for a few weeks. A few weeks, using my space, without asking, without warning, without paying, quietly, like someone lending a lawn, not private property. I was shocked. I tried to keep my composure and told her it was trespassing. She replied that it was decided at the last meeting that the HOA could use underutilized community spaces in the name of the collective good, and that since I didn't use the barn for anything relevant, it was all settled. I almost had a stroke. Over the next few days, my barn became an aromatherapy logistics center. There were mattress deliveries, kombucha drum deliveries, incense boxes, colorful mats, detox juices with names that sounded like spells, healing the root chakra, Saturn elixir, intergalactic detox. I would pass by and see volunteers carrying the things with an air of superiority, as if they were taking part in a humanitarian mission and not trespassing on property with flavorings. I even tried to get some boxes out of there. The next day, I received a notice from the HOA for unauthorized interference with a community item. This woman was so full of shit, you could use a stage. That's when I realized that any normal reaction would only make me look like the crazy guy on the street. She had her speech ready. Anti-collective resident who doesn't understand the spirit of sharing. And if I shouted, I'd become the villain of yoga. So I did what any man with common sense and a thirst for discreet revenge would do. I changed the locks on the barn. I locked all the doors, closed the windows, and sealed the back with a thick chain. And I went fishing. I spotted an old friend who lives 3 hours away, called him, packed my gear, and left. No cell phone, no internet, no desire to deal with that mess. 7 days. 7 wonderful days in the middle of the forest, with the smell of bait, the sound of water, and 0 people trying to convince me to drink turmeric tea with Peruvian maca root. I knew that when I got back, the damage would be done, and I couldn't wait to see it. Returning home after a week fishing is like coming back from another planet. Your head feels light, your body is tired in a good way, and for a brief moment, the world seems less silly. But this effect is short-lived, especially when you have neighbors who believe that the neighborhood is an extension of their own ego. I got out of the truck with my feet still in the river's atmosphere, my shirt smelling of camping smoke and a glimmer of peace left in my soul. I only had to look ahead to realize it was over. There were people in my backyard. Yes, people, in a circle, with their eyes closed, arms open, and someone beating a drum that looked like it was made from tofu skin and vegan goat suffering. The side lawn was covered with mattresses, and right next to the locked door of my barn, there was a makeshift altar with colored stones, a picture of Karen framed with dried flowers, and a sign, "Transcendence in the midst of chaos. Embrace change." I didn't know whether to laugh or splash cold water on my face to wake up. 2 residents were sitting cross-legged meditating. A third woman was fanning herself with eucalyptus leaves, and in the background, the owner of the chaos herself was speaking in front of the locked door, as if she were a priestess, about to open the portal to eternal well-being. When she saw me, she stopped talking. It was instantaneous. Silence fell like a circus tarpaulin after the wrong act. Her eyes shot to me. Her hands clenched the sides of her white robe as if she were about to use the dress itself as a symbolic sword. "We need to talk," she said, walking towards me with the same posture as someone who goes on stage to collect an award they don't deserve. I pretended not to hear. I started unloading the fishing gear, throwing the boxes on the floor more loudly than necessary, just to see if the meditators would lose their concentration. It worked. One of them fell over sideways. Another choked on his tea. She insisted, "What you did was a very serious breach of the collective agreement. Community activities have been disrupted, deliveries are stuck, and this has caused emotional damage to several people." Emotional damage. That was the level of the parallel reality she was living in. People invading my property, using my space without authorization, and the problem was the trauma of the sealed crates. I remained silent. I threw the last cooler on the floor, cracked open a beer, and sat on the bucket. The drum stopped. The mattresses were being collected. An older woman tried to talk about the energetic impact of my hostile presence, but a fly flew past her face, and the moment dissolved into grunts. Karen, of course, didn't give up. She returned the next day with a form, letterhead, HOA seal in the corner, and a list of demands. The document claimed that since I had accepted the occupancy of the barn for a previous period without formal registered objection, this constituted tacit agreement to emergency community use. I would therefore be held liable for material and symbolic damage resulting from the sudden interruption of activities. In short, she would sue me for locking up the illegal deposit itself. I made a copy, I stapled it together, and I took it straight to my lawyer. The good thing about the countryside is that you always meet someone with a degree who also hates bureaucrats. The guy read it with a laugh, asked if it was a prank, and sent back the shortest answer in the history of local jurisprudence. The use of the barn without a contract, express permission, or formal compensation characterizes trespass. Blocking the space is a legitimate exercise of rights. The activities carried out there, in addition to not being provided for in the minutes, do not have the authorization of the owner and are therefore illegal. I suggest that the HOA find another place to stack mattresses and bottles of green juice. I sent this by email, with a copy to all the HOA board members. What followed was a slow-motion storm. First, gossip started circulating. He's going to tear down the barn out of anger. He's suing the entire HOA. He's against health and wellness. A neighbor accused me of being closed-minded. A man who sold handmade candles blocked me on social media. But the best part was yet to come. I received a letter. Not from the HOA, from the carrier. Karen's deliveries had overstayed their welcome. The companies started charging a fee per day late. And since the address was mine, the bills were in my name. I called. I explained. I sent documents. The carrier, after checking the records, understood what had happened. They canceled the charges and redirected all the costs to her. $3,000 in storage and delay. The following week, the wellness dome began to dismantle. The carpets disappeared. The drums were silenced. The altar sign disappeared into thin air. Silence returned to my street. She, of course, hadn't finished yet. People like that never finish. But at that moment, the barn was mine again. With the musty smell I knew, and without the smell of adulterated lavender, you'd think that, after the public demoralization, the carrier's charges, and the flight of her aromatic cult followers, the woman would back down. Perhaps she would take some time off, introspect, really meditate. But no, some people, when they lose control, don't learn. They harden up, and they go for what they call their last shot. The invitation came on a Friday. A sheet of paper stapled to my front door, with an HOA stamp and recycled paper, of course. Extraordinary General Meeting. Pompous title, even more so. Restructuring the common use of community spaces. Translation? I was setting up a vote to try to turn my barn into a community asset. A blatant, legalized coup. She wanted to use the assembly to formalize the use of my own land as a depository for juice, yoga, and ownerless boxes. The agenda included words like territorial solidarity, shared practice, and collective engagement in idle spaces, all written with that false tone of inclusion, which really only serves to camouflage absolute control. The assembly was scheduled for Saturday night. She knew what she was doing. Saturday night, everyone wants to rest. Catch a movie, order some food, put the kids to bed. With luck, half a dozen of the same old residents would show up and she'd get what she wanted. A symbolic vote by acclamation. A nice term for nobody came, so I decide. But this time, she underestimated the damage she had caused. News of the attempted confiscation spread faster than gossip in a beauty parlor. The whole neighborhood heard about it. That neighbor who collects cats spread the news as if it were a criminal complaint. The ex-husband of one of Karen's friends, who now sells tacos from the food truck on the corner, made a point of sticking a sign on the body. Does the owner of the yoga club want her barn too? It went viral in the microcosm of our community. What was supposed to be a discreet meeting became an event. At the appointed time, the HOA headquarters was packed. People stood up, children sat on the floor. Even old Walter, who hasn't left the house since he lost his cat in 2004, showed up. Some came out of support, others out of hatred, and many just for the bullshit. In the end, it was a circus. She arrived all dressed up. Her hair was tied back with a gold clip. She wore a white dress, a stone necklace that said peace and purity, but shone like a siren. She climbed onto the small makeshift stage, with the same intonation as always, that voice of someone who thinks she's higher than everyone else, but deep down is just desperate for control. We are gathered here to pursue what has always been our goal, collective well-being. He continued his speech with ready-made phrases, talking about unity, the conscious use of resources, the new proposal for underused spaces. He even tried to divert the focus by saying that the barn could benefit school projects, shared gardens, children's art workshops, all very nice, on paper. She opened the floor to comments. The first to speak was the girl from House 9, who said she had to pay a fine because her son's bicycle was leaning against the curb. Then it was the turn of a man who said he had been warned, because his garden had very vibrant colors that harmed the chromatic harmony of the neighborhood. There was even a young man who reported being threatened with sanction for wearing camouflage shorts at an inappropriate time. Instead of support, she received accumulated hurt. When they called me to speak, I was direct. No frills. I said that the barn is mine, that it had been invaded, that the boxes were put there without warning, without permission, and without agreement, that I locked it to protect my rights, and that I left precisely so as not to lose control, something that was clearly lacking on the other side. I showed documents, photos, the carrier's charges, and finally, I threw the bucket. My lawyer was suing the HOA for trespassing and misuse of private space for unregistered purposes. The reaction was a dry silence. Not even the healing drum from the week before could have broken the mood. A resident in the background shouted, "This isn't welfare! This is barnstorming!" The phrase fell like a stone. People laughed. Others applauded. Someone was recording everything on their cell phone. Karen, her face tense, tried to continue the assembly, but no one was listening. She lost the floor, literally. The makeshift stage sank a little, and for a second, it seemed as if the universe had given a physical response to the sting. The meeting ended there. Nothing was voted on. Nothing was approved. And she left before it was over, her necklace dangling around her neck and her dignity hanging from her shoulders like a wet sheet. The barn? It was still locked, intact, and more symbolic than ever. The HOA meeting didn't end. It fell apart. It melted down right there, in the middle of empty speeches, old accusations, and a barn that became a symbol of involuntary resistance. What was supposed to be Karen's moment of glory turned into a festival of public exposure. And although everyone left looking like they'd seen more than they bargained for, she didn't give up. The woman disappeared for a few days. No letter, no bulletin, no WhatsApp groups with phrases like, "We need to talk about community energy," or "Has anyone seen my yoga mat?" Nothing. What would have been relief turned into suspicion, because her silence was never absence. It was always the harbinger of some stupidity, disguised as moral justice. The following Wednesday, I received an anonymous letter, handwritten, unsigned, but in such controlled handwriting that it could only be from her. It said, "You think you've won, but what has been locked away is still breathing. Not everything that disappears surrenders. The barn may be yours, but time belongs to those who know how to use it." Yes, it sounded like a threat straight out of a B-movie, a cryptic, dramatic manifesto that tried to pass itself off as pub philosophy, but sounded more like a warning of revenge. I kept the note, of course, because smart people don't tear up evidence, especially when you're dealing with someone who believes that the universe conspires in mandalas. And then came the day I went to open the barn again. I'd left it closed for longer than I'd planned. The smell inside was already a mixture of damp wood, old sweat, and rosemary essence that had leaked out of some abandoned box. I put on gloves, opened it carefully, and went inside. Half of her things were still there. The incense sticks had melted. The juice bottles had fermented so much that they looked like they were about to explode. The mattresses were moldy, but there was something new. A box in the corner, taped shut with a note stuck on top. "For your reconciliation with the community. Burn it after reading." I didn't open it. I called an acquaintance who works in special waste disposal. I asked if he could take it all. He said it would pay well. I just didn't want to see that mystical disgrace on my property anymore. He arrived with the truck in the afternoon, loaded everything in silence, and only made a joke saying that he never imagined transporting sour spirituality in a cardboard box. In the end, we signed the receipt. He left, and the barn was as clean as ever. It even felt like a new beginning, a post-Karen era. 2 days later, I received a notice. She was suing me for wrongful disposal of community property. Yes, that's right. After weeks of accusing me, trying to take over my space, making a fuss in assembly, leaving boxes rotting in my barn, now she was accusing me of disposing of the very remains of her spiritual occupation without permission. But this time, she was wrong, because the disposal receipt was signed, documented, and attached to the lawsuit were prints from the HOA group itself, where she said that the contents of the boxes belonged to the club and everyone's philosophy. But after the barn incident, no one wanted anything back. In a nutshell, she tried to sue for abandoning things that even she didn't want back. The judge laughed. Literally. According to my lawyer, during the hearing, the magistrate said, "It seems to me that we have here an attempt to turn invasion into legalized mysticism." The case was dismissed. She was fined for bad faith litigation. And then came the end. A week later, she resigned. She said she was going to move, to find a community more in line with her inner axis. She handed over the HOA presidency, returned her badge, stopped handing out flyers, and for the first time in months, there was silence. The real thing. On the last day, she walked past my house. She didn't even look. She wore a wide-brimmed hat, a scarf around her neck, and a flowery dress that looked like it had come out of a 70s catalog. She walked slowly, like someone accepting a defeat that can't be explained. And inside that gate was the last spark of the ego that turned her into the joke she tried to avoid. The barn, now renovated, has become what it always was, mine. It serves as a workshop, a resting place, a place to store real things, not fantasies of control disguised as well-being. I've never had another visit from the HOA, and whenever I see a lavender-scented box on the sidewalk, I look twice, just in case. And if you like this video, don't forget to comment and like it.